Hopefully I don't flip over. Hey, good morning everyone. Welcome to Built by Sam, and welcome to part 3 of the shop bathroom edition. Today we're going to get going on getting the walls framed up and put up and try to get the roof framing done. And we're also going to have to get the hole cut in through the shop to the addition here. As you can see, we got the sheathing done on the floor. We got the access to the crawl cut in. Got everything done down there. Plumbing completed. So now what we got to do is start framing up some walls. Let's get going. Okay, so we're going to lay out both the bottom plate and top plate and bottom plate and top plate of both walls at the same time. And if you notice, I got them marked to where once you move this one up, this will be this wall, and this is a mirror image of it on that wall. So anytime you can lay out multiple top and bottom plates at the same time, the less chance you have of inaccuracies. So we can go ahead and pull our stud layout. And most people know that, you know, you hook on your wall and your first stud's 1.5 inches. And since you're hooked on the left side of it, your next stud would be at 16, which your next stud would be here. But the problem is if you do that and you know you're putting sheathing on this wall that's going to start at this end, whether it's the interior drywall on an interior wall or like this, the exterior wall, if you just lay it out in that orientation, when you get to the 48-inch mark and your stud is now here, what happens is when you butt your sheathing right up to the existing wall, when it gets here, there'll be nothing for this sheet to land on. The sheet's going to stop here, which would be short of the stud. So what you do is all your stud layouts, you hold them back 3/4 of an inch, which is 1/2 of a width of a stud. So now your stud would be from 47 1/4 to 48 3/4. There's your 1.5 inch stud. So now your sheathing, when it lands on this wall, your seam lands right in the center of that stud. And then as you go on from there. So, and if you have to rehook on the wall, after that point, once you hook onto a stud, then you can regain your 16 on center at that point because you already shifted all the studs down. But if you're still hooked on the initial point where the sheathing is going to start, that's where you hold them back to 3/4 of an inch. So again, instead of 16, you're at 15 1/4. Instead of 32, 31 1/4. We got a 47 1/4 marked. We're at 63 1/4. 79 1/4. And then our overall length of our wall is 92 inches. So this is the cutoff here. So we got 92. We'll cut that off, and obviously there'll be a stud here on the end. So now that you got one board marked, you can take your speed square and you can mark them all at once. And again, since we laid these out as if it's a mirror image, you see I got them top and bottom. That end's going to be the existing wall of the shop. That way they match each other and line up how we want them to line up. So this is our cutoff here. So we can go through and chop all those off, and we can start nailing in our studs. I always really liked this Makita saw, but most of my Makita batteries have kind of died out on me, and I have a ton of Milwaukee batteries. So these little adapters, you can get them on Amazon. I mean, they work great. I can run my Milwaukee batteries on there, no problem. This one fits right onto here. So I do have quite a few Milwaukee or Makita tools that I still run off my Milwaukee batteries, but they make them for every variation. So if you got a ton of DeWalt batteries and you want to run a Makita or Milwaukee or vice versa, they got pretty much every combination you can think of. So I could put a link for you guys if you want to see those, but they really have come in handy. So we're using pre-cut studs. These are for an 8-foot wall, so when you buy them, they're 92 5/8 in length. And what that does is, once you put your, so 92 5/8 the stud is, that's how they come all cut. So once you have your bottom plate and top plate, and then you end up putting your double top plate on, because anytime you build a wall, you should have a double top plate. And there's two reasons for that. One is when your rafters or trusses land on here, if they don't land directly over a stud, you at least have a double top plate to support that truss or rafter, whatever it may be. The second reason is when you get to an end of a wall, you have another wall coming off of here, what you'll do is you'll stop this one short, and then your next top plate will go onto that wall and tie it together. So the tops of all your walls are tied together. So then what happens once you do your double top plate, your wall actually ends up about 1.25 inches taller than an 8-foot ceiling. So that way you get basically a finished height of 8 feet. So after you put your 1/2-inch drywall in here, you still have 3/4 inch for your flooring, which typically if you have tile or hardwood or even carpeting, you eat up about 3/4 inch. So that way your finished ceiling height in your room is still right around 8 feet. If you were to just build an 8-foot wall to the top of your double top plate, and then you drywall it and carpeting in it, you know, you're going to be an inch and a half short, 1.25 short of your 8-foot mark at that point. So they make them for 8-foot walls, 9-foot walls, even 10-footers. But it just makes framing much easier. Everything stays consistent, and you don't have to cut every stud that you're working with. So last week it was 94 degrees out almost every day, 80-90% humidity. This morning I wake up, it's 46 degrees out and pretty chilly, but the sun's coming out, it's warming up. It's gonna be like 72 today, which is perfect, no humidity. So my kind of weather, but gotta love Michigan. One day it can be hot and humid, next day it can be fall weather. You guys notice I'm using different nailer this time. Showed you guys my Milwaukee cordless stopped working on me after a couple of years, so I submitted a warranty request on it. They sent me a packing slip, I gotta send it in. So hopefully they fix it for free. But I've had a couple of these in the past, the same rigid gun. And for the money, you can't beat them. They work great for 200 bucks. It's lightweight, fire's good. Never really had a problem with them. So it's nice when you sheet a wall before you stand it up, or you sheet a wall on the floor. Obviously it's easier to nail and everything, but you can use the sheathing to square up the wall. So first you just want to flush up one side, preferably the long side, and then nail it off. Then once you got one long side nailed off, you come down to the bottom and you can move the wall. So like if right now, if it was hanging over like that, you can twist the wall a little bit. And once it's flushed out, the sheet of plywood's perfectly square. That means your wall's perfectly square at that point. So then you can just come through, nail off the bottom. So now you can see why we held back them studs to 3/4 inch when we did our initial layout on the top and bottom plate. Like I said earlier, if you didn't hold them back 3/4, your stud would be out here and this sheet would be floating in the breeze because there wouldn't be a stud behind it. So since we held them back 3/4, your sheet lands in the center and you can nail it off. case you're not aware, there's a textured side and a pretty smooth side to OSB. And your textured side should always be towards the exterior for a couple of reasons. One, if it's roof sheeting, you're sheeting a roof, this has a nice texture to it, you're not gonna slip. If you were to put the smooth side up, you would slip like crazy if it was a little bit wet on it. Second reason, it's got your nailing patterns on there, so if you're running across a roof, you run it perpendicular to the rafters, you know where your rafters are at. And then the third reason is, when you get your rough inspection, if you have, your inspector comes in and he's looking up at your roof sheeting or your exterior wall sheeting, he can see the writing that's on the back of the sheet, and it gives you the thickness of the material, 1/2 inch OSB, if it was 7/16 on a roof or whatever it may be. But at least that's visible from the ground. They wouldn't have to climb up on the roof to actually see the thickness of the sheathing. So that's just a couple reasons, quick tip for you. But yeah, definitely rough side faces out. So one more thing I wanted to point out to you guys is when you sheet walls, exterior walls in particularly, you run your sheets from your bottom plate to your top plate in length. So if you got an 8-foot wall, you got 8-foot sheets, you flush them out at the bottom and you pull them to the top. Pretty much any other application like a roof or subflooring or anything like that, you're going across the joists, across the rafters. This way you're going with the direction of the studs. And there's a few reasons for that. One of them is it's a direct connection from your bottom plate to your top plate of your wall. So the sheathing acts as a tie that connects your vertical studs, your top and bottom plate. So that way, if there's ever an uplift situation where, you know, tornado or whatever comes by, hurricane type thing, you're not lifting the top plate off of the wall studs. You know, your nails aren't very strong when they go into the end grain of a 2x4, and it can, you know, you can pop the top plate or bottom plate off a wall pretty easy, but when the sheathing laps over it and you're nailed into that top plate and all the studs the whole length and the bottom plate, now you have a continuous member that would be very tough to pull apart. So I like to throw these blocks on the outside of my rim joists. That way I got something to butt up the wall to. And then you're not on the inside trying to figure out where you're at. You can just butt them into it, throw a couple nails in, tack it in place. Then you can come out and check it, make sure it's good. One thing I did do ahead of time, I didn't record it, but I marked out where the wall was gonna land, and I cut back my existing trim. I cut it and mitered it and folded it here. And that way I have something to connect the new piece of transition trim in here. So once we get the nail or the bottom plate secured, we'll plumb it up here against the building. We'll nail it off into the wall girts that we got marked here on the studs. So anytime you can level a wall from the top plate to bottom plate, if you got a long enough level, or they even got plate levels that have a little pad on them, top and bottom, and they extend. It's just a much more accurate way to plumb up a wall. Because if you just put it on a stud, that stud could have a little bit of a bow in it, and then your level's rocking, or, you know, it could throw you off. So if you just level your top and bottom plate, that's how you know the wall is perfectly true and not the stud itself. We're really good right there. Just gonna throw a nail in here. Check one more time.
watching stuff.
Yeah, anything good?
I'm watching a fishing video.
Oh, that's a good one.
I'm gonna come out there and I'm gonna watch 2 more shows.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Okay, so before we build this outside wall here, I can't really put that up yet because once I put that up, I won't have a way to get in and out of here. There's going to be a small window here, but not enough to get in and out. So before we go and build that, we're going to cut our door opening into the existing building here. So it's going to be a 32-inch right-hand door, so it's going to swing into the right here. My vanity's over on this side. I got a small linen closet on this side. So anytime you do an interior door, whatever your door size is, you add 2 inches for the rough opening. So a 32-inch door needs a 34-inch rough opening in width. So that's what I got marked here, these 2 inside lines. But what I want to do is I want to overcut these 1.5 inches, cut them back, so then I can put a 2x4 frame in here, because right now there's only wall girts every 24 inches basically, and there's nothing in between them besides foam. So I want to cut them an extra 1.5 inches back on each side, and that allowed me to go ahead and put 2 2x4s on either side. Then my opening after that, my rough opening, will be 34 inches. And then almost all your interior doors, unless you're getting 8-foot doors or something, are 80 inches tall. And you typically add 2, 2.5 to the overall height of the doors. So right at the bottom of this wall girt here is 82.5, which is good. I don't want to cut into that if I don't have to, so I'm going to cut right below that. And we're going to cut through this, and I have 1.5 inch foam in between the wall girts, and then I have 1.5 inch foam on top of the wall girts. So we're going to cut through the first layer of foam and partially into the second layer. Then we'll have to finish cutting that out. We can put in our 2x4s, and then we're going to cut our interior OSB that's on the face of the wall to the inside of the 2x4s. So the 2x4s will go against it. We'll cut that out, and we'll have our opening. So it's definitely not necessary to use the track saw, but track saw is one of those tools, once you have it, you don't realize how much you'll use it, and it just makes things so much easier. Instead of just trying to chalk out a line and follow that line perfectly, you set your track up and it just makes everything so much easier. So there's probably some screws through the OSB into these wall girts. So I'm going to have to go on the other side and pull those out real quick. Okay, I got the screws out. I did use foam glue on all these joints and connections when I put it together, so it's still probably, plus I think there's some screws with washers into the foam. You can see how that construction foam glue, I mean, yeah, it's just the foil paper, but that stuff grabs to anything. Okay, that one's gonna stay. So now we're just gonna use the multi-tool to finish cutting through the foam, which it should be cut about halfway through already from the track saw, but the track saw only goes about 2.5 inches deep. And this is 3 inches. Diamond boy.
I want to get some lunch.
Get some lunch, you hungry?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
12.5.
12:05.
If I have a seat, so you can just lift me up.
Push it.
If you don't have a chisel, if you have a hammer, you can just use a hammer.
Yeah, you can
Just
use
put
it. Yeah, try to pull that down and I'll get this side.
This?
Yeah. Pull. Good job.
Huh?
Good job.
Yeah.
Let me cut this off here. So whenever you use a board as a template and you trace it, I've always found that you gotta cut the line off or else they end up long. So normally you kind of cut either down the center of the line or the outside of the line when you make a mark. But when you trace something, you gotta remove that line because your lead was on the outside of that board. So that way when you line them back up and you flush them out, they end up nice and flush. So just a little trick for you. So these are jacks here. They're going underneath the window. I got them laid out already. And what we'll do is this is going to be the outside face of the wall. So the inside of this is the inside. I don't know if you can see, but now they're all pitched to where this side's lower than this side. So this is the height that we established. We wanted them at 48 inches off the floor to the bottom of the window, and then it pitches outward. So now we'll cut our sill in between here. And when we nail it on, the sill will have a very slight outward pitch to it. That way, with any water, when we wrap our sill, when any water gets on it, it can run out and not run back into the building and get behind the drywall and insulation and all that. So I don't like doing any more than a 2.5 degree pitch on it. Some guys try to do a 5 degree, but if you get too much of a pitch, then the 2x4 is gonna end up sticking out past your studs because on a diagonal, it's wider than the studs. So this way, it's barely makes a difference and it still planes out fine. I'd say that worked out pretty well. Tractor made it easy. Fit right in. We gotta nail these outside corners, but worked out perfect where the sheathing overlapped the other wall. Both sides. Everything's flushed out down here. What we're gonna do is we'll get some more. I got more of this tape in there. We'll do another row and cover the sheathing right over the subfloor and tie into that, and then we'll do our house wrap on top of that, and that way if any moisture gets behind the house wrap or comes down, it'll go right down here, and none of this stuff can wick up moisture that way. All right, so we're gonna figure out our rafters real quick. If you guys have never cut rafters, I mean, this is a very basic gable. There's no hips or valleys or anything crazy going on, so this is pretty straightforward. So basically, from the outside wall to outside wall, with the sheathing and everything, is 110 3/8 of an inch. So that's outside to outside. We want to finish from the fascia to the wall, we want 12-inch overhang. We're going to be using a 2x8 with a 2x8 ridge. So what we got to do is kind of break this down into triangles to figure this out. And it's pretty simple math, and if you have a construction calculator, it makes it even easier because you can put in your rise and run, and it kind of helps calculate a lot of things for you. So basically our first triangle we want to figure out is the total length of this rafter from the face of the 2x8 ridge to the back side of the 2x6. We're going to put a 2x6 fascia board on here that's going to go behind the steel. So what we want to do for that, we know our total building is 110 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so that's from outside to outside. And since we're working in triangles, we got to cut this all in half. So basically we're going to figure everything out in this orientation. So if we go ahead and just divide this in half right now, divided by 2, we got 55 3/16. So that's from the center of the ridge to the outside of the wall is 55 3/16. But now we want to have a 12-inch overhang. But we know we want to put a 2x6 on here, so that's 12 inches minus the 1.5 inches for the 2x6 that's going to go on there. So 12 inches minus 1.5 inches is 10.5 inches. So we're going to add 10 1/2 inches. So now we got from the center of the ridge to the back side of the fascia board is 65 11/16 from the plumb line here to the back side here. Okay, but now we got a ridge up here. So we got to take half of this thickness of this ridge out of here. Since we're just doing a single ply 2x8, half of that width is 3/4 of an inch because it's 1.5 inches thick. So now we're going to minus 3/4. We got 64 15/16 from the face of the ridge board to the back side of the fascia board. So we're just going to write that down just so we don't lose it. So 64 15/16 of an inch. Okay, so now that is called our run. So that's the horizontal distance from the center, or from the face of that to the back of that. So we're going to put that in as run. So we're just going to hit run right there. We know we want a 4/12 pitch, which means for every 12 inches inward, the roof rises 4 inches. So the way you put pitch into this is you just would do 4 inches and hit pitch. You hit pitch again, it'll tell you the degrees that is. So a 4/12 pitch is 18.43 degrees. It tells you your grade, your slope, it's your pitch. Okay, so now we know we have, so as soon as you have 2 dimensions, then this can figure out the 3rd dimension for you just by clicking on it. So we put in the run, we put in the pitch. So now if I want to know the rise, it means from the bottom of this 2x8 that's out here to the tip of the where the ridge is at, it's 21 5/8 tall. Okay, so that number we really don't need right now. Like I said, we're trying to figure out the rafters. So now if we do diagonal, you hit the diagonal button right here. That gives you the distance from this point to the back side of the fascia, or the fascia board here. So if we cut a 4/12 cut on the board and measure from the point down and make a mark at 68 7/16, that'd be the short point of our next plumb cut, our next 4/12 cut. So this is our rafter length. So if I'm going to just draw this rafter out real quick, just so you guys can make sure you understand it. So this distance was 68 and 7/16. Sorry if you can't see my writing, but. So from point, and this is a 412 cut, or an 18.43 degrees. So we got a 412 on that end and a 412 at that end. Okay, so the next thing we got to figure out is our little bird's mouth notch we're going to put in here. Okay, so if you look back at this, we want it to sit fully on the top of that 2x4. So we know we want this cut here to be 3.5 inches across the top, so it fully seats on that 2x4 wall. We don't know this height of this yet, but we need to figure out the location. So the location is going to be another 412 cut that's parallel with this one. So we need to know from the point to this point how far that is, and it's basically the same procedure, except instead of adding the overhang in here, we're just going to use half of this dimension. So our total wall outside to outside is 110 and 3/8, and we got to divide that by 2. So now that's from the center line to the outside of the wall, and we're not going to add the overhang right now because we just want to know the outside of the wall distance, but we got to subtract half our ridge beam, which is 3/4 inch. So we're going to minus 3/4 equals. So that's our run. So we hit run. It's going to save that as our run from the face of that 2x8 ridge to the face of the wall. So now we know our pitch is a 4-inch pitch, a 412 pitch. And we can figure out our diagonal now. So from the tip of this ridge here to the outside of this wall, it's going to be 57 and 3/8 of an inch from that plumb cut to this plumb cut here. But we don't want to cut it off because you'll lose the whole tail. But that'd be the plumb cut on our bird's mouth there. And we can just figure this out when we lay the square on there. We can put the square, so it's 3.5 inches hits here, then we know that we have a 3.5 inch seat. But we can also figure out the height of that seat if we want. So we know our run is 3.5 inch is the run. And we know we're doing a 4-inch pitch. So our rise, which would be the distance of this seat to the bottom, would be 1 3/16. So that means our bird's mouth is 3.5 inches by 1 3/16 high. And that's basically it for cutting these rafters. So we can lay that out on a 2x8, get it cut, and we'll see how it looks. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is cut this 412 plumb cut on the end of the 2x8 here. And just like the floor joists, you want to make sure the crown is always facing up on the rafters as well. So if you have a speed square, you can use the speed square instead of a framing square. But basically your common cuts are your ridge cuts and your plumb cuts at your tails. So all you got to do is put that 4, put your pivot on the top of the board, put that 4 so it lines up with the top of the board there. And then you could draw your 412. So now that's our ridge cut. Go ahead and cut that. Let's verify it. That's right. So we'll flush that end up. Come over here right on the 4. So now we're going to measure our overall length, 68 and 7/16. So from the tip of that, we go 68 and 7/16. And that's where we'll put our pivot. And then we'll line our 4 up again, right at the top of the board. Make sure your pivot's on there. So now this is our plumb cut on the tail of the rafter. So now we need our bird's mouth location. So we determined that was going to be 57 and 3/8 from the ridge. So go 57 and 3/8. Make a little mark. So we draw put our pivot on our mark there, line up our 412 here, make our mark. So now this is the outside of the wall right here. This location is the outside of the sheathing on the wall. So now we know we want a 3.5-inch seat for the wall to sit on, or to sit on the 2x4 on top of the wall. So what we can do is you can line up your framing square right on the line you drew, and you can adjust it down until your 3.5-inch mark gets to the end of the 2x8 here. So we want to make sure we stay in our line. And right now it's at 3.5 inches. And if you see that little mark right there, that's actually 1 3/16 inches up. And that was the other number that we figured out. 1 3/16 is the rise, and the 3.5 inches is the run. So that's our bird mouth. So when the 2x4 wall, when this sits on it, and we cut that out, you'll have a full contact sitting on top of the wall there. But now that I'm actually looking at it, we have 1/2-inch sheeting on the outside here too. So in order to get full contact, we're gonna have to go up a little bit higher to make that a full contact. So we need, sorry if I confuse you, we actually need 4 inches of seat. So if we bring that down to you're on the 4, that line's flush there. So now if we cut that out, and if you look now, you have room for your 1/2-inch sheathing here and your 2x4 here. So once the sheathing goes on and it planes out over top of your fascia board, so we could cut these on a miter if we wanted. You know, we could rip miter the fascia boards so it's flat all the way to the end. Or most people hold them down like that. I'm probably gonna rip them. So if that's the case, our 5.5-inch 2x6 down the face here. So that's where a 2x6 would go. And then what we would do is we would just cut these tails off 90 degrees to our plumb cut, because this is perfectly plumb. So 90 degrees to that is perfectly level to the ground. So if you notice, that line and that line match each other. So we can cut this off. Our 2x6 fascia go there. That'll be the bottom of our soffit. Yep, that's it. We'll get it cut out. And once you have one, you can use it as a template and keep retracing them. So I'm just back out here in the shop. It's almost like 10 o'clock at night. I think it actually is a little past 10 now. But I had some running around to do, and I figured I'm just gonna hop back out here and at least try to get the rest of these rafters cut up so that maybe in the morning I can get that roof put up. So I just figured I'd set the miter saw up. I'll get the ends chopped on them, get them to length, get the ridge and tail cut on them. Then I'll come back and mark all the birds' mouths out and get those cut. This makes me really wish I had built my miter stand or miter station first. Every time I want to use this saw, it's just a hassle. I mean, I got it on a folding table right now, which is driving me crazy, but it's better than being on my knees on the floor. But I really wish I would have built my miter station before all these other projects, so every time I use this thing, I'd have a nice station and stops and guides and everything that would just make repetitive cuts like this so much easier. But it's fine, we'll get to it one of these days. So all right, I got them all cut. Got the tails and the ridges cut on them. Next, I'm gonna lay out the bird's mouths, and we'll get all those cut out. Hey, good morning, guys. Back out in the shop again. So last night, you guys didn't see it because my camera died at the end of the night there, but I decided to just make a mock-up of the footprint of the wall that's outside. And my idea is, and it might be a bad idea because hopefully it ends up working, is I'm gonna assemble all the roof here on the floor. This here on the ground is just temporary screwed together, and I'm not gonna actually attach any of the roof structure to that, it's just sitting on it. But this simulates the two walls that are out there that the trusses are gonna, or rafters are gonna sit on, and the ridge. And my plan is put all the rafters in, sheet most of it, put the overhang on, put the fascia boards on, and then get the tractor out with my boom truss, and we'll get a set of straps and pick it up by the ridge and see if we can just set it on top of the room out there. I don't know what the reason for this is, other than I thought it'd be kind of fun to do. And it was late last night. I wanted to keep working on some things, so I figured I could start assembling some stuff while it was dark out. So hopefully it works. The math on it, I figured it's gonna be about 400 pounds when it's done. So I'm thinking the tractor should be able to pick it up. So we shall see. Worst comes to worst, we might take some parts off. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. So what I like doing when I'm framing up rafters to a ridge like this is I'll come in and I'll put every other rafter in on either side, staggering them. And what that allows me to do is to come in from the back side and either throw a couple screws in it or a couple nails in it. And what that really helps do is, a lot of times your ridge is, it's got a little twist in it, lumber's never perfectly straight. And when you're trying to put both of them on and just toenailing them in, you can't really draw that ridge into the rafters very well. So when you screw them from the back side, it draws that ridge right into the cuts. And if your cuts are good, your ridge would be nice and straight. So I just went through, I screwed every other one from the back side. Now I can come in and put the ones on the opposite side of them. But everything's ending up just where it should. So I'll go ahead and screw the rest of these in, or nail the rest of these in. And we'll get our fascia boards on, and we'll put our ceiling joists in too, to tie all this together. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting a little concerned at how much this thing weighs. I'm hoping my little tractor is gonna be able to pick it up. But let me give you guys a closer look, kind of how all this all went together. So we got our ridge and rafters, like we talked about. Then we went and put our ceiling joists in. So those go from the outside of the wall to the outside of the wall, basically right to the outside of the bird's mouth cut, and just get nailed in right on top of the seat here. And got one on every joist, so that keeps the trusses from being able to spread out, plus it gives us our ceiling that we can insulate and drywall. Then we went and put our fascia board on. This will all get wrapped in metal after the fact, but I put the same 18.5 degree or 18.4 degree bevel on the fascia board. It all planed out with our tail cuts on the rafters. And we flushed that up, and I transferred the layout from the ridge. I just held it up along the ridge, transferred it to here, then I brought it down here, and then nailed them into the tails. And that way your measurements are correct on the spacing. So all those went in on both sides. And then for the overhang, some guys build like a ladder, like a double-sided ladder, then they go and nail that on the last rafter or last truss. What I like to do if I'm conventional framing is I'll run my ridge long and I'll cut it to my overhang distance, and then I end up notching it out because your overhang is, your fascia and soffit's thinner than the ridge was. I can't have that ridge way down here because the soffit's only 5.5 inches thick. So I notch it out. But what that does is it gives it this spine all the way out to the point out here, so that this fascia and soffit doesn't ever sag on you. And I do the same thing with the fascia boards down here. I run them all the way to the end and tie them in. So now you got 2 points that prevent it from sagging. And then if you're wondering why these actually stick up a little bit here, is because when you minus the 3/4 of an inch from each rafter, you're stopping the rafter at this point. But if you actually look at where the rafter planes out, you got that little gap underneath the square. The tips of these, if there was no ridge here, would be slightly higher than that ridge because they carry on beyond that ridge. So where those 2 points intersect is the height of this above the ridge here. So that's not a mistake. That's how that's supposed to be. And then this just gets split on the ridge. And the fascia boards, or the rake boards here, they're the same cuts as the rafters are, but you have to add 3/4 of an inch on this end, and you had to add 1.5 inches on this end to lap it over this way. So, because the other ones stopped on the inside of this fascia, these stop on the outside. So you have to add the 1.5 inches plus the 3/4, which is half of the ridge, and then those get cut at the same angles as the 2x8s do. And even though it's a 2x6, it's still the same distance from here to here, plus the 1.5 inches and the 3/4, but it doesn't change because of the board thickness. So other than that, you know, this roof's small enough to where a 2x6 rafter would have been plenty strong enough. But the problem is when you go to insulate your ceiling, you wouldn't have much heel height here above the wall. So when you go and try to put your R30 or R38 in here, you need like 10 plus inches of heel height here to get full insulation at the wall without it touching the roof. So you got to use a taller board. So even these technically aren't high enough. This is about 9 inches or 8 inches from here to the top of the wall. And I think the R32 or R38 that I have is 10 inches thick. But I mean, I would have had to go to almost a 2x12 to get that much height out of it. But this is fine. It's not like it's in a house that I'm trying to build super energy efficient. It'd be more than plenty for what we got going on. So the only thing left to do is I might throw at least a couple of sheets of plywood on this just to keep everything square and so it doesn't get twisted on me. And we can get that screwed down or get that nailed down, and then we'll see if we can pick this thing up. And I'm crossing my fingers that I can, because if not, I don't know what plan B is going to be. So we shall see. We're going to use the plywood the same way we did on the walls to square up the walls. We can use it to square up the roof. So we'll flush out the long side here. You see how nice that planes out with just putting a little bevel on there instead of having the sheathings sitting back and square cut, 90. It gives you a nice straight line that you can square everything up to. I guess all we can do is see what happens here. So these sheets of plywood, I only put a handful of nails in them just in case I do got to take them off. If this does lift up well, I'll finish nailing them. So we're probably going to just put one strap in the center. That'll do all the heavy lifting. Then I might just use a ratchet strap to one end of the hook to balance it if it needs to be balanced. So I built this jib when I built the barn, or before I built the barn. So I built it to build the barn. I set all my trusses with it, beams, posts, all that stuff. So I got confidence in it. I just hope this thing's not heavier than I think it is. And if it is, then I don't know, we might have to take the plywood off at least. I am a little bummed though. I do have a winch built into this that hooks to the battery, and I got a wireless remote that controls the cable, but I can't find it. So I can't find the remote. So we're gonna have to just use the hydraulics to go up and down, and we'll see what happens here. Lower it down. Not looking too promising. It's a little worried there. I didn't think it was going to do it, but it did. I shortened up the boom and it was able to pick it up. So now I just got to figure out how to get that cable wound up a little bit because like I said, I don't have the wireless remote for my winch. So I think I can disengage it and spool it up. I got to shorten that cable. Now that the boom went in, it made the cable hang down farther. So I'm going to try to get that, and then I'm going to make sure we're still square, throw a few more nails in it, and then we'll see if we can get it on the roof over there. No problem. think I'm gonna have to set it from the side so that the boom clears the roof as I set it up there. So I think I'm gonna have to go just like that. So I hope I got enough height. If not, we can scoot the boom out a little bit. I just don't know at what point I can't pick it up anymore. All right, let's cross our fingers and hopefully we got enough height. I got a strap on here for a little tag line. I don't know if I can do this by myself, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully I don't flip over. Wow. I don't know if, I didn't know if I was gonna do it. I'm shocked. I'd say that's pretty darn good for, I'd say that's not a bad fit for setting it with a tractor. Tiny tractor on that. I'm sure we got to square it up a little bit. Looks like this end's got to come over a little. But that was a little stressful. This is a little bit of a slope right here, so made it a little uneasy. And I might have to trim a little metal right here too to get it to go all the way against the wall. But yeah, little John Deere did it. I had pretty much every weight I own on the back of this thing. I think there's 18 42-pound weights sitting there. There's even a couple sitting there that don't even click on, they're just hanging there. But in this tractor, I'll give a shout out to Hydros Plus. If you guys own a John Deere 1 or 2 series, I think it even makes it for 3 series now. It has an upgraded hydraulic pump. So this stock, it only flows maybe like, I think it's 3 or 4 gallons a minute. And with that, it's closer to 10. And then it has the upgraded cylinders. So these are like I want to say a 2.5 inch instead of a 2 inch. So you get more lift capacity, more hydraulic flow. And I got my hydraulic pressure turned up, I think to 2,500 PSI. Stock, they're about 1,900 PSI. But she did it. That was cool. So we'll get up there and kind of wiggle things around. I'll trim back that metal, and we can kind of secure it, make sure it's squared in place and secured in place. But for the most part, it looks pretty good. And I did a 412 pitch on this to match the 412 on the dormer up top. So the main barn has a 512, and then all 3 dormers have 412s, and now this has a 412. So, alrighty, cool. Looks pretty good. Everything sat down real nice. I still got to trim that little metal on the corner so I can get it tight up against the building. That 2x8 rafter needs to go tight to the wall up there, and we'll get it squared up. But all in all, I think it worked out good. My front rafter is about a 1/2 inch back where I want it, so when I sheet the front, it'll plane out perfectly with the front wall. And we'll attach it down and finish sheeting it. Looks good. Okay guys, that's gonna be it for today's video. I got 40 people coming here tomorrow afternoon for my daughter's birthday party, and it's gonna be out here in the shop, and I got a lot of cleaning to do. This place is a mess right now. So I appreciate you guys watching. Hit that like button if you like what you saw. If you want to see more like this, hit subscribe, and we'll see you on part, I guess it'll be part 4, and we'll be getting, probably working on the roof steel and the wall siding, the wall steel, get the windows in, or window in, door in, and get this thing wrapped up. So thanks again. We'll see you on the next one.